screens and faces and boxes all the time for the last 6 months. So I do apologize, but if you're new, welcome. If you've been here and my mind is failing me, then welcome again, and I apologize. And I think I just, so I don't know, it's so small. I mean, we can kind of direct, normally we do breakout rooms, but I feel like that kind of would just, you know, break up what little we have. I know like George and I have been working on a lot of different stuff. I'm sure Scott can chime in somehow on what he's been working on. And also just like we can kind of, you know, let the conversation, you know, just catch up. Any questions people have, we can, you know, see where the conversation, like the topics go. So, George, you want to talk a little bit about like our call on Monday?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I volunteered with NYC Mesh in the past. I've been absent for the past couple months, working with Bed Suy Strong, which is a mutual aid organization in my neighborhood. And most of what BSS is focused on is like food access for our neighbors. So we do like grocery deliveries and stuff. And we have a couple other initiatives as well. And I'm hoping to break into internet access and see how NYC Mesh and BSS can partner up to get folks in the neighborhood access. And as a pilot project, we are going to try and get an installation in Herbert von King. So it's a park in like North Bed-Stuy. It's maybe, I think it's like a block or two.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
one second.
I can kind of follow up on that. Yeah, so we're talking about Herbert von King Park, which is, it's off of Marcy and by like DeKalb. It's like about, yeah, it's about like 2 city blocks. It's a rectangular park in an area that like is pretty central in Bed-Stuy, but also like doesn't, it kind of is set aside from like the actual like a lot of the businesses, and which would be more on like Nostrand and Malcolm X, and so it's a very residential area as well. And the thought is kind of to make some more public spaces that have community Wi-Fi available. And George, you can, if you're back now, you can take it on.
Yeah, that's quite right. I think the goal is to get a mesh network set up on ground level for at least part of the park. And I think this will be great. Herbert von King is packed on the weekends. I've seen like Instagram photos of people doing their homework at the tables on the south side of the park. So it's perfect. And I think it's very doable. I think the general like technical plan is that we will set up a hub somewhere on a roof, and then we will have antennas at ground level, like mounted to buildings. Hopefully we can find people that live like in apartments directly facing the park, or businesses can have an antenna there, like outside of on their storefront. Also, there is a big structure in the middle of the park that's about 2 stories tall, and it would be great if we can install an antenna there. I have chatted to a couple people about that, and I'll.
Sorry, what did you say?
In all likelihood, it will. I was saying that I've been like looking into getting an antenna installed in the middle of in the building that's in the middle of the park. And I think that'll require some sort of coordination with city officials, and probably talking to the parks office.
That makes sense. Yeah. So if you guys are interested, there is a channel on our Slack. I can share it with you in a second. But someone did mention, I think on the Slack, that there's a community garden next to the park across the street, and they had like just met the president of the community garden. I'm not and that they would be interested probably in like working with that. So definitely, at least like on the perimeters of the park, it seems really doable. And let me just show you the channel too. Do you want to talk a little bit about BSS? Because I was just so impressed. Like I still like kind of can't get over it as an organization.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we started in March as a response to COVID, and we kind of started off as like a Slack channel with a phone number that neighbors could call, a spreadsheet, and a Venmo account. And people just kind of started delivering groceries to neighbors, and we'd reimburse them from the community fund. And this kind of just like the organization grew out of that. And since March, we've done, yeah, there are numbers there. I think we've done like 200,000 meals worth of groceries. Yeah, there we go. And that's about $600,000 in donations redistributed. We've had some other side projects that I've been really excited about, like we did a census phone banking recently and reached like 10,000 people in Bed Stuy. We did a, like throughout the summer, an AC redistribution program and redistributed like 200 or 300 ACs. Yeah, so lots of good stuff there. I've been working on the automation primarily. And so that's like the systems that we use for managing requests that come in from neighbors, and how we assign deliveries to folks, and kind of the operation side of it as well.
Yeah. I added the link or the URL for the org in the chat, and as well as the name of our channel. So we linked our channels on Slack. So people from Bed Suy Strong Slack group, which is also one of the more active Slack groups I have seen, which I enjoy because I'm already on the app. And then NYC Mesh, so they're able to kind of like merge together and have conversations without necessarily bringing people onto a whole new platform or within the Slack realm. It is already a platform itself. But and I've been super impressed with just their ability to organize so quickly and effectively. And I mean, I was even just like, their website's very simple and it gets straight to the point. Their Slack group also, like I would show it, but I think it'd be too hard for me to log in on my computer. Just kind of I just was very impressed on an organizational level, because it just really like has been my experience observing the organization so far has been very good at like telling people, donors and volunteers, like what's the purpose, and also like engaging with them like immediately. So like you hop on the Slack and then they like have directions, like introduce yourself. And then someone like messaged me like with another welcome of like a hello. And it's just been like really great. And I can see how they, I still am shocked how many volunteers, it's like 1,000 people on your Slack already. And you're delivering to 200 people every Saturday, even so. So like, it's become like this massive army in 6 months, which is incredible. And it's just seeing the value in like a nonprofit or a mutual aid organization using effective organizing strategies has been really just really cool to observe and learn from personally. Sorry.
Thanks for saying that. That was really nice. I did notice a question in the chat: is BSS tax deductible? We have a fiscal sponsor, IOB, which is like a Brooklyn crowdfunding site. So yes, you can donate to BSS, or your donations are tax deductible. We still get a lot of our donations through Venmo, and those are not tax deductible.
And that's all on the website too. And yeah, so if you're interested in helping out with either, I mean, on the Wi-Fi project, BSS has a lot of, as I just said, like a lot of great support for volunteer engagement if you're looking to become involved in some way. Then also, if you'd like to work on like the NYC Mesh project, I mean, this is a Mesh meeting. So obviously we also want volunteers. Like we're doing a site survey on Saturday at 12. It seems like people are George, you're the one who actually organized that. Yeah. So at Herbert von King Park. So it will be socially distanced, wear a mask, you know, be smart. But it's, yeah, so at 12 p.m. and also just going on the Slack, on our Slack channel to keep up with the conversation as well. So, and I mean, another thing we've kind of mentioned, we talked about this on Monday, but also like we've been talking about a lot over the last year is, and even I think previous, even before I was involved with Mesh, was just building out neighborhood chapters and really helping volunteers engage with their neighborhood on like a hyper local level. So I think last year when we really were surging in a lot of installs, one thing that was a little bit of a kind of, I think maybe didn't keep installers was like a lot of times you would do an install that was like just anywhere around the city. Like, I mean, I did a lot in like deeper into Bushwick or Ridgewood, and I live in Fort Greene, or like Prospect Leopards Gardens or Manhattan. And it's like, you do that and you don't really get to know your neighbors. You don't really get to see how the network is, like just seeing that your, you know, your install was successful and like, you know, you don't really, so it kind of, it becomes this one day event and there isn't much follow through. And we've talked about just neighborhood chapters from just like a logistical and like sanity standpoint, and the fact that you don't have to like schlep materials all over the city, but also as I was like talking to George and we were kind of coming to like it, I think it'll help taking to like encourage more of that perspective when we're doing installs or like how we're building out our network. And you know, if you want to get involved or if there's a network, if the network's not in your area, like it really is at the end of the day like a grassroots movement, and it's only going to like happen, and it's gonna happen in a way that's like sustainable for like you as a volunteer and an installer and like the community if you know we're working with our neighbors and you know the ones in our neighborhood, not just in the city. So yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have like stuff they want to talk about, questions or?
I live in Bay Ridge. I was wondering, is your internet service available in Bay Ridge?
It's getting there. So we have the Supernode 3 right now. I can pull up the map. So, sorry, one sec. So, and that's a little bit of where I think kind of emphasizes what I was just talking about, is that like I get a lot of people like you who's like, you know, Bay Ridge or Bensonhurst, or I live in Queens, and like, where's this network going to start? And I think as an organization, we haven't really created like a good model for supporting, you know, like responding to like interest from people, like I guess like generate or like responding to interest from people. So it's kind of sometimes a little bit like, oh, well, the network isn't quite there yet, so we'll get down there, or you know, how do I zoom in? Sorry. I think giving more, so yeah, tools on like, or support on how to bring this down to here.
I'm on 84th Street.
Sorry, what do you say?
I'm on 84th Street.
84th? Okay.
It's way down more.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like this, like that's an example where I definitely, especially this area, I receive emails from people, you know, in meetings, like you're not the first person from this area, and it's so close. It's like, why haven't we expanded yet? And I think that that's where we need to troubleshoot on. Sorry, I'm sharing my. That's where we kind of, as an organization, need to like troubleshoot on how to expand faster their contract.
What type of speed do you get? How many megabits per second would I get if it were available?
Well, so it does, roughly it's between 50 and 100. So when we do a connection, so we're not going to install if there isn't a strong connection, or it's going to be like a very strong warning. But even that is usually just not really recommended, because I think people say that they can handle worse speeds than they, you know, before they're actually dealing with it. But the thing is, so the way that the network, how speeds are kind of determined is so how close you are to a supernode. So because that, or how close you are to fiber, basically. So it would be, and how many hops you have away. So hop would be like if a fiber I can share the map again. So this is like the supernode here in Industry City, Sunset Park. And so that's going to be the strongest connection, these ones that are directly connecting to it. And then someone can connect from another node to, you know, to a line of sight. Whoever has a line of sight to, theoretically, these nodes would be able to connect, but the speeds would decrease a bit. But I mean, to show you, I mean, like people who are hopping off with one hop would still have strong speeds. Two hops, like, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm explaining this well, but so like this one is, this dot here, 1340, is connecting to Manhattan. And then this one is then connecting to, say, this blue dot. And then this blue dot, or well, okay, this blue dot. And then this blue dot is connecting to this one. So that's one hop, two hop, three hop. And yeah, I mean, that's where I think generally we stopped doing, we probably wouldn't do another hop off of that, or we would set up an antenna that could reroute to get the strongest speed. So that would be an omnidirectional antenna, but that would probably be around the 50 megabits per second.
So the speed degrades every time you hop to another?
It does, correct, yeah. So I've seen like by half, I want to say, that it degrades for each hop, but I don't think it's that clear cut.
Okay.
Are there?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no.
Sorry if the questions is I'm really new to this. I don't know anything about it. So are the hops connected to each other, or are they isolated like stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so a hop would be connected to one another. So I can go back to that map. No, this is helpful for me figuring out how to explain it to people in a hopefully clear way. So as I was saying, so like this node here, so this blue dot, I don't know where the dots went, but
yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so that's supernode 1, and then that sends a wireless signal to this dot here, which is in Bushwick. And then, so that would be one hop. And then going up to Saratoga is sending another connection to hub 664, and that's a second hop. So they're connected wirelessly, and then Cypress would connect to that. So all of them, they all have to have line of sight, which literally means like I can see the, not with the naked eye, but like there's no obstruction of buildings or bridges or trees. So like to show line of sight, I'm trying to think of an address that's not, can anyone think of like an address in New York City? I don't want to give my own address. That's why. I feel like the Washington Park. Okay, it's probably. So this is a building in NYU, but like even though the network is technically right around here, it doesn't have line of sight because other larger buildings are obstructing view to this, Washington Muse is that tiny little like European street by NYU. So those buildings are like 2 or 3 stories. So whereas
so basically New York City would be really difficult because it's full of tall buildings, right?
Yeah. So but then One World Trade Center you can connect to because it's very tall. So it's kind of the city because of that. Yeah, because it's tall buildings, but also with short buildings. So it's one thing if they were all tall and even, because then you could just hop, you'd still have line of sight. If you're on one building, you could see it from anywhere, but it's this, I think I've heard it described as like, oh, thanks, Scott, canyons and valleys of like the urban canyons, someone described it as. So you're kind of navigating up and down, which makes it difficult to do like just a pure blanket network. And that's why in Bay Ridge, you probably, even though the antenna would theoretically send a signal from Industry City down to where you live, like it's not that far, there are most likely buildings in between it and stuff. And let me send you that link, Rich, right now, or just the line of sight, and you can type in your own address. I don't want you to have to put it. This is
if I were to check what.
So try that line of sight tool right now and type in your address, because maybe there is a line of sight. I mean, I don't know your building structure.
I'm in Boston actually, so I'm really grateful for this Zoom medium to be able to join this meeting. So because I'm not in New York City,
Oh, where are you right now?
I'm in Boston.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So you can definitely. It has been kind of like a nice little turn of events, because especially with like this, like we've there has been a lot of people who've been wanting to build community networks, and we've been able to like have meetings and connect, and like I've been able to, sometimes we have guest speakers at these meetings, and like I've always wanted to like get people to come, but they might be in Boston or they're in California or something, and it's like, or they just don't have time to come in person to an event. So whereas like we are all in the comforts of our own homes, so it's that kind of nice little thing. Are you?
If I were to check what networks are available in my area, how would I identify the mesh network?
So if you're just looking for general internet, NYC Mesh probably won't come up on most websites just looking for internet, because, so no access, no fix. Sorry. But if you're looking, I mean, if you're just looking for general internet, I mean, we're not really coming up on those websites. And yeah, we should get in the database. But I feel like those databases are a little weird. And I don't know. I was just recently looking up internet services, and
I don't mean on a website. I mean, if I check my wireless connections and see what networks are available, if I'm within a range of a node,
yeah,
it show up.
Yeah, so any of those blue dots you should be able to see a public connection. I'll just hop back to that map. Because the blue dots mean that there's an omnitic or some sort of omnidirectional antenna attached.
Well, what would the name of the network be?
It's called NYC Mesh Public Wi-Fi, I believe.
Okay.
I probably have an image of the.
So that's just an easy way for me to check if I have access.
I mean, you're not going to have it in Bay Ridge. So those are more like if you're walking by a node and you're on the street, you'll see it. But if you have access, try that link I just sent you, that los.nycmesh.net,
Okay.
and take your address. And if your address says you have line of sight, that means we could do an install. So you also still wouldn't just have it. We'd have to go up and put an antenna on your rooftop. But I mean, if you have line of sight, that's awesome, because then we could actually start getting into Bay Ridge, which would be really cool.
Okay.
I had a question. I recently moved to New York, and I do have a line of sight with the Bushwick hub. And I also found in my building, I do have an antenna, but that's not connected to the hub. So yeah, so what's I guess I can check the Slack channel, but I think should be easy to connect.
Yeah, so you already have it. Oh, nice job, Scott. You already have an antenna, like an NYC Mesh antenna.
Yeah, and it shows up on the map. It just doesn't say that it's connected, and I'm pretty sure it's not connected.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
and the hub is just across the street, so it should be very easy for me to do something. But I wasn't sure.
That it's like if we can just reconnect the antenna if it's not being powered currently, and just run a cable down to your apartment, or if it's your neighbors and it is. I mean, even if it's your neighbors, we can theoretically like just run a cable down and we just tell them first, I guess. But
Jillian, can I add something real quick? I finally figured out how to get my audio. Everybody should, if you are interested in joining the network, if you haven't filled out the little online form, which is literally just your email and address so that we have your location and email, that's the best first step, because that gets you into the database. And then that way a volunteer can reach out and say, hey, it looks like you'll get an email from NYC Mesh saying, here's what we're all about. These are the instructions to join, et cetera, et cetera. And then that kind of starts the back and forth that you can say, there's a node already in my building, or I'm already here. And then a volunteer can follow up with you and say, great, let's figure out how to get this working. That's the easiest way. And Jillian put in that link. So filling that out, I'd say, is probably the best first step. And then, obviously getting more involved as a volunteer is always even better.
Yeah, I have filled that out, and I also received an email. It was recently. So, but I thought I'm attending this meeting, so I'll ask that question anyway. But yes, sure. I think I'll check if it's powered, and then I do have a router, so I should be able to run a cable if it's powered correctly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the easiest.
Jillian, I think.
Are you familiar with the DIY install channel on Slack?
Oh, I haven't joined the Slack channel, but in the email there were instructions about the DIY channel. I have
Got it. Yeah. You just mentioned that you had a router and such, and so that's one place, at least for kind of, if you want to join and feel that you probably may have the capability to just be able to do so, or may just need 50 yards of cable and somebody locally can walk it over to your place or something. That's just another place, like a good resource to go to ask questions, get set up.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. I will do that.
Yeah.
Jillian, I didn't get the email you sent me. Where did you send it to?
Sorry, I put it in the chat. So the chat's at the bottom. Yeah. So I can retype it.
I don't know how to get to the chat. Down here.
Yeah, it's just like.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, los.nycmesh.net.
I got it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I have more questions, but
I feel free. Yeah, I saw you. Like.
So one of the reasons I'm really interested in this is, so I'm from Iran. Like I'm originally from Iran, and we've had so we always have a lot of internet censorship. And recently in the past winter, we had I think a 10-day government literally internet shutdown. And I know that people were talking at the time about peer-to-peer networks, but basically whoever I talked to was saying this is practically impossible in an urban area like Tehran. Tehran is really populated, kind of around the same population as New York. So I was wondering if this mesh network relies on the existing internet infrastructure in a sense, or if, for example, let's say there is an earthquake or something, or there is an internet shutdown in New York City, would it still continue to function, or does it still rely on some kind of wireless connectivity through a regular Wi-Fi? Or
Scott, do you want to take this? Your answer.
Does the question make sense? I'm sorry.
It does. I just wasn't sure if Scott wanted to answer, but I'm not sure if he was on the. Okay. Yeah. So that.
I was looking. Sorry. This conversation has come up before in our Slack with respect to Iran, I believe, and so I was searching our archives to try to see what that discussion was.
Yeah, I was like, wow, he checked out pretty quickly. And I could start off though a bit. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, mesh networks are often built quickly as in disaster areas and increasingly for censorship. I am not sure how much it has actually been. Personally, I don't have too many active cases of where it's really being used for censorship. Not that it can't be, but just because it is kind of not only just the deployment of infrastructure, but then also in order to use it, so if your internet is shut down, a mesh network has its own network. So if the global internet shut down, in theory, you can still communicate with one another without being connected to the internet, but that network has to have certain things on it in order to communicate. So it has to have the network has to have some sort of infrastructure in order to be worthwhile or usable emergency situations. Our network is increasingly becoming like that. So we've built a chat sites, and then also we have a Jitsi account and stuff, and we do have some documentation that can be accessed even if the global internet is shut down. Well, Iran in Slack. But then also it is, I think sometimes what I hear is sometimes a little glossed over the fact, like they're just like, any mesh network, you can communicate with each other when the government shuts down. And it's like, there has to be a bit of planning in just making, ways for people to communicate when the internet is shut down. And I have been also seeing like other instances with people using cellular technology to do similar mesh networks that might be that are sometimes a little just more versatile when it comes to disaster and government shutdowns. So there's a project called Disaster Radio that's doing that. They're still very low level. And there's also GoTenna as well, which is actually a company that sells devices that are kind of like radio devices that mesh together. They do a lot of stuff with the military. So sometimes there's, it depends on how pure you want to be with your technology and where it comes from. But and then to add to also talk back in favor of mesh networks. So a good example of an urban area with a disaster, a good case study is the Red Hook projects in Red Hook, Brooklyn. So I can, in a minute, I'll share. So they built a network in 2012 or so, a mesh network. And that was a way because they were not getting viable access in their neighborhood. And so they built their own mesh network in the housing complex. And during Hurricane Sandy, which was in so maybe the mesh network was a bit earlier than 2012, 2010, let's say, and then Hurricane Sandy happened in 2012, in the fall of 2012. And their network, because it wasn't, it meshed with one another, so therefore the antennas were able to reroute to whichever was had the strongest signal and connection. Their internet was able to stay up during Hurricane Sandy, when a lot of other people who were on traditional service providers that relied on more centralized infrastructure lost internet during that time. So it does happen and their network also had some means for communication on the network beyond just the global internet. So I can share that. There's definitely one case study I've read on it, and that's a cool project. But I think like it really should be like it does require like a lot of pre-planning before a government shutdown or or a disaster happens, or it's not going to be all that effective. And then there are other options that are a little more versatile, such as using like cellular technologies. So, but I'm not super well versed on it. And I realized, so the description of this meetup was an old one that said Access Now was coming, and they're not. But they do a lot with government shutdowns. But I can also send you the link for when they were here a few months ago. So Meetup's been repeating my bios, and I forgot to edit it. So. But
I'm just asking the last question. I don't want to take everyone's time.
No.
So in New York City, like you just mentioned that you're setting up new ones in a park. I don't remember the name of the park because I'm. So and you said so there are some like regulatory things like talking to city officials. So like how do you explain this project to a city official? How do you convince them to let you like build up those like I don't know, whatever antenna or whatever that you want to set up? Like how do you explain your mesh networks to them?
That is definitely a Scott question, because basically he does all of that conversation with. Do you want to talk about your experience?
Sure. Fahad, do you want free internet access for? No, we don't use the term free, but we are a mission-focused community organization that believes that the internet is for everyone. And in New York City, we have spent decades trying to achieve that mission, and it's been to no avail. And we really think of ourselves as being a grassroots community organization that's focused on that express mission. And I think when we talk with NYCHA, for example, our the New York City Housing Authority, when we talk to parks, when we talk to other kind of city agencies in particular, they understand the need for connectivity. They get it now more than ever, and are looking for kind of innovative outside of the box solutions. I mean, you know, a lot of these folks have a long history working with people like Charter, AT&T, and others, and usually, you know, I think that's one solution. We try to market ourselves as talking about how we're very different. We're not collecting data on people. We're a community organization. We're a nonprofit. It looks good for them to be able to partner with people like us. And so we try to give opportunities for them to do press about it. But it is a lot of times like sticking a square peg into a round hole, and the government agencies don't really know how to work with folks in our model. You know, they have been doing business with Verizon for decades or ages, and they know exactly how to make that work. So in many cases, we really find that we're the first test case. And so for example, with the New York City Housing Authority, you know, they had never worked with a community organization that can provide internet. So we had to work with attorneys to do endless questions. And a lot of it gets down to educating and kind of building those long-term relationships, educating folks about what it is that we do and why we care about it. It is not a cut and dry, easy process. City in particular, I think, is very, very skeptical of us, and skeptical of kind of this volunteer internet thing. Sounds, you know, really foreign to them in many ways. And it is, but, you know, our mission is to kind of educate folks about what's possible.
It's definitely, yeah, I mean, our experience is obviously primarily with New York City's government, which I think is particularly filled with red tape. I mean, they're, you know, dealing with 8 million people, so you can imagine, but it's not, I have seen a lot of positive response from smaller municipalities and much more open to experimenting. If you can find the funding, they're not going to give you money, but neither is New York City. So, but are you trying to do this in Iran or in Boston or both?
So not in Boston. I don't think I would really think about really setting up something here, but I was thinking of mostly like in terms of Iran, like why is it possible to set up something like that. And I know that's like, so there are like also physical antennas and things like that. So it's like if someone wants to do that, it's gonna be an illegal project. So I can see why it's not possible. But also the thing is that I'm a student in anthropology, so I've become really fascinated with projects like yours, and I just really wanted to learn more about what you're doing, and which I think is just fascinating, and about the technical aspects of it, about the practical challenges of it, about how you want to expand it, and yeah. So I'm just really curious.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll even add to the series of questions. Is we used to have a very active volunteer from Lebanon who actually returned to Lebanon not so long ago. But in the way that he often talks about it and has done some writing for us about it, it's like mesh networking. Like a lot of what we do here is how lots of folks in Lebanon get, like that's how the majority of people are connected online, which does create a lot of possibilities for what Jillian was talking about with kind of intra-networks, where you're able to communicate over a network without being connected to the global internet. So even if there is an internet shutdown, for example, you still have kind of peer-to-peer means of communication, which is, you know, I think something that's very unique about building kind of community run grassroots kind of networks and spaces. But that may just be an interesting model or place to be able to look also where, you know, at least we have one volunteer who had a lot of experience about it.
Yeah, I mean, if we could probably get you in contact with them if we want to just chat about that.
He's on Twitter. Giorgio's on Twitter. We can find him. We can track him down.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there are kind of bounced off still, as Scott was saying too. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of examples of this happening internationally where it's an immediate need, like it's a more obvious need. I think in the United States it doesn't seem as obvious because you would think that there's more SPs, but aside from that story, because especially in like rural areas or just there's been an increasing number of internet shutdowns around the globe. I mean, and I know that Cuba has their own takes on, there's been some mesh networking implemented. I'm not super well versed on the whole structure, but there is definitely illegal what they're doing, and so they're still installing antennas in this capacity. I'm sure there's stuff going on in Kashmir right now, in India, because it's just been so long and drawn out that I'm sure that you could probably dig up some stuff on the internet. And then I would also like look at, like, if you just want to like learn about it or whatever, the Internet Society has a lot of, is a good platform for learning about different community networks around the globe. So just as a good starting point as well.
Yeah, definitely. When I saw New York City, my first impression was, why New York City? New York City everyone should have access to internet. It's so easy. Like I would expect it in a really far off rural area. So.
Yeah, I mean, why New York City? That's like what we talk about. We try to convince every grant or like foundation to give us money. But yeah, I mean, like, they should have access. The city agreed a few years ago had a contract with Verizon to install fiber on every single city block, and by 2014, and they didn't follow through on it. So the city is suing Verizon currently for that, but then they're hiring them for other projects and, relying on them to, be the main manager of the majority of our infrastructure in the city. It's like a very abusive relationship where the city just hopes Verizon will change.
I mean, if I can even add, Jillian, I mean, in New York City, 1.5 million people don't have access to home or mobile broadband. So a community the size of Houston, Texas, lives inside of New York City without access to the internet. So the scale of the problem is unmatched really anywhere else in the United States. More than the size of Wyoming. That we talk about rural broadband in Wyoming. We could fit 3 of their states inside of New York City, and still all those people wouldn't have internet access. So, why New York? It's such an incredible problem, but we also have such opportunity here in New York with the kind of, as Jillian was sharing, the kind of topology of the city allows us to have a really unique opportunity for this kind of network infrastructure. Draw volunteers and expertise and other sorts of things like that. So I think that, for creating a model for how to think innovatively about how to, serve and connect folks and create community solutions to connectivity, where we actually have a huge opportunity here in the city as well. So I think that combination of an incredible need matched with great opportunity really, makes for fertile ground for a successful project.
And also, I would add that while you might have ISPs, you might not have choice. So, for example, my building does not have a choice over ISP. Like, I have to use Optimum, even though it sucks. It really sucks. It's not a first world internet connection with Optimum, at least in my building. So when you don't have choice, does it matter? Like, even though you, in principle, have internet access, but you don't have choice. And
building pre-installed with internet. Like, I know that some buildings, like new developments, are like, installing internet already, and then they're like, oh, it's coming with Optimum, just as part of the pack.
No, it's a very old building. I don't know the details, but I contacted Comcast and Verizon, and they were like, oh, we don't serve that building. So
okay, yeah, and that's definitely the case too. But then also, I'm seeing, just to add another layer of just diminishing of choice, is that I'm seeing that like property, new construction is just lining it with their ISP of choice. And I think that the thought is probably like, oh, it's going to, it's one less thing for our residents to think about. And obviously, usually those are like super luxury buildings, but even so, it's like they shouldn't be limiting their tenants' ability to choose if they have that choice. And a lot of people don't even have a choice beyond that. So
in many cases, there are partnerships between landlords and internet service providers, whereby landlords actually get a cut of your bill to ensure that there's a monopoly within your building.
I feel like we should sue the city for that.
That's the San Francisco tried to disrupt that,
Yeah.
but the FCC recently kind of shut it down.
Okay, well, we should sue them in next year if we can.
So my other question is, who owns the fiber optic cables? Because everything is getting connected to the super hubs. I mean, let me call them super hubs. One in Manhattan and one in Industry City. So who owns those fiber optic cables?
Yeah, the fiber we currently have is donated. So the one in Manhattan is donated from DKIX, which is an internet exchange provider, a German one, and they're located in the data center where we have Supernode 1, and then Supernode 3 is donated from Pilot Fiber, which is a commercial ISP that we've worked with a lot in previous years. So we've been lucky. So it's, I guess, owned by these companies theoretically. And then we've discussed in the past of actually leasing fiber connections ourselves. That generally the quotes we've been getting is a $15,000 initial fee for the installation. I think that kind of varies though on like what the project is itself, but I guess I've seen as high as $15,000 and then $1,500 a month for 10-year lease. That's been kind of the going rate. So we've been a little hesitant to jump on that, as you can imagine. And
of course.
And we've been able to get donated fiber. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I wasn't sure if maybe I was not going from, but it also like, it doesn't take all that much bandwidth to connect. So like in Supernode 1, we only have 1 gigabit and then a 1 gigabit connection. And it's not connected to a server, but it's connecting, it connected over 400 households. It was the primary Supernode for up until last year when Supernode 3 was installed, which has the 40 gigabits. And that's allowing us more bandwidth to like host stuff and build out a more robust network. But it is kind of fascinating how I think that we sometimes think that we need a lot more bandwidth than we do. And it seems like a lot of companies and governments and stuff have a lot of bandwidth lying around. So identifying those and like building partnerships. Maybe I'm being naive, but it seems like there's not always it seems like a fiber lease should be like a last resort. So
Right. No, so I asked because going back to this, of course, for US, it seems more abstract compared to Iran or Kashmir. But, I was thinking about like, if those fiber nodes are owned by entities, of course, they have control over the traffic across the fiber nodes.
Yeah, like what we're connecting with are at such a low level that we're not concerned about the control of the traffic, but that is a really good point because I think a lot of the, especially the fast, like the more ad hoc networks in communities are using just a regular broadband connection, or like they're just using a business line, or maybe they are going through a fiber lease, but usually even like a layer above a fiber lease where it's going to be through a more traditional ISP who would have much more just insight into the traffic that's going through it. And I think in those cases that that's why it's like really important. In my understanding of situations where you have to be particularly discreet about what you're browsing or what your communication is to have a private intranet that can at least guarantee it's not leaving the network. So
Are there strict legal restrictions over the bandwidth that antenna uses, the frequency bandwidth that you're using to communicate?
Yeah, so we have to stay on the public Wi-Fi spectrum. Is that so it's the same spectrum that's used for Bluetooth and just kind of more like Coomer use rather than. And so we've had some issues with stuff like not being on the the FCC changing what channels or like what the spectrum is, and you know, being told like, oh, this was going to interfere with planes, or this is going to, and they're pretty. I mean, there is enough spectrum, but it's like it's increasingly getting smaller and smaller. And like when you think of like, but my understanding on the topic is like, especially with like the movement or like the increase in like IoT and just dependence on wireless technology, like how this is going to interfere with wireless networks. Yeah, I can't really speak on it too much, but I think there is a concern about that a bit, but and it also.
Sorry to cut you off, John.
Even just an example is like a few years ago, the FCC kind of had a huge overhaul on what was compatible on their wireless spectrum for consumers, and it a lot of just like even microphones and stuff were no longer usable or no longer legally usable. So, and that could happen to the equipment as well. But I think the equipment could probably be adjusted because it's like it has the ability to, you can move it onto different channels, whereas I guess a wireless microphone or a Bluetooth would not necessarily have that capability. So, Scott, do you have anything to answer on that? I am kind of like digging back into my head from articles I read.
I was just going to say, I was going to say that, you know, we do optimize channels. We optimize frequencies. That's happening on a daily basis across the network. It's particularly an issue because we're within 35 kilometers of 3 airports, which places a lot of significant restrictions for us with respect to radar. And so we operate in that. It's obviously a crowded spectrum environment as well. And, you know, folks like Starry and other kind of, you know, even commercial ISPs operate on the same kind of public frequencies that we do. We don't have any antennas using proprietary spectrum. So, but that's something, you know, we could look at if things get crowded and you need kind of backhaul or backbone connections. But then again, as you may be aware, the, you know, FCC recently opened up Wi-Fi 6 and a lot of potential new public spectrum that, you know, manufacturers and others aren't going to be getting onto until for another couple of years. But I am hopeful that, you know, there's going to be a space for that wireless networks like ours can kind of take advantage of.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. You two are really testing our knowledge, or my knowledge at least today. It's like, oh wow, I'm pulling out some of like just some stuff I've read about like in the past year or something like that. And it's very interesting questions. It's been really.
This is really helpful because like whatever, you know, I personally learn 1/100th of that. Like so this is really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that there are also some networks at various stages in Boston as well. I mean, like there definitely was one a few years ago, and I think that there has been somewhat of a resurgence as well. And it just might be interesting to kind of see what they're up to, what their story is. I mean, obviously with like you know, MIT and Harvard and stuff, there's the people who who are interested in kind of different internet policies and different internet network architecture. So I would definitely suggest checking that out more. But I think there's been a new one in like the last year or two that they've been trying to do in some capacity. So.
I didn't know of any. So I just moved recently to New York, but I used to live in Cambridge, across Charles from Boston. So yeah, there weren't any.
So close. Okay.
Yeah, I used to live in Cambridge, and yeah, I did. I was digging into, like, when I was in Boston, I got interested in like community networks and things. So I was looking into this. I didn't find any, and I was practically like really very close to MIT campus. I was near Kendall Station, if that, yeah. So yeah, but there may be some smaller projects without much reach. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think that like sometimes there are small projects that like they like that's kind of sometimes like I've noticed like parsing through like lists of like community networks. It's like, oh, this is actually like completely defunct, or like they just have like 2 active nodes and they're really just custom stuff. Yeah, so that's was kind of what I was thinking, but I thought maybe I'd heard something of some researchers. I do have a friend in Boston who wants to get into mesh networking, so maybe I can set that up too.
Yeah,
so
if you could like, connect to each other and see.
I think he'd be interested in starting a community. So because like every time he even comes down to New York, he like wants to go on an installer meeting or something like that. So finding good roof space is in Cambridge is really hard. Yeah, I would imagine that. I'm not super familiar because I mean Boston's a lot of like houses and like is it a lot of pitched roofs there or flat?
It depends. It really depends on parts of like some parts of Cambridge are really just like suburban like houses, but yeah, you're right. Yeah. So how much of a like roof space is needed? Like can't you just install it on a
like almost nothing. It's like installing like a shoebox onto sometimes like a wall, like if we have like a wall, or if there isn't some sort of wall on a rooftop to install it on, like we would get a pole and like a weighted base. So it's very non-invasive, and we at least pride ourselves on lining our cable in a more neatly than your traditional ISP or dish or something like that would do. So but yeah, I think that's like sometimes we get people like, or especially like property managers and stuff who are like, oh, we don't want to do that. That's going to like ruin the building. Like, we don't want some big antenna. It's like, dude, it's like, first of all, you already have like 30 of them up there. And like just go up onto your roof, which you're probably not, especially if you're a New York City landlord. And then also it takes up no space. Even if you have like a beautiful, rooftop or something, you just put it on the side on like a railing. So. But.
I mean, everyone already has an ugly window AC stuck out of their window. That's pretty visible in the city, I guess.
Exactly. So, and even like a luxury like skyrise or something, they're gonna have some roof at the top that's like just totally for utilities, and it probably already has antennas. And I guarantee it has some kind of AP or some kind of router. So, yeah, I think a lot of our work is sometimes just like convincing people that it's really not as invasive, or we're not like a bunch of hackers, or like we're not like, it's not this like crazy thing to build a network. So it's really using like the knowledge and like landscape that we are actually familiar with, and just using it in a different way. So oh, yeah. Yeah, do you guys? Hi.
I got to run, Jillian.
Okay.
Take care. I just had a quick question. So I'm at a much different level of like expertise with all this stuff, but I moved to New York recently, and I find like
all these people moving to New York. I thought we were all fleeing.
Joining the
Still happening. That's great.
The New York Times is telling me.
Yeah, so I was just curious what the best way like might be to get involved, like with somebody, like who is not like super technically like proficient.
I mean, I started exactly 2 years ago, and I could not set up Ethernet when I first went to college. So I just used Wi-Fi the entire, like I had no idea how to do anything technical. So like you will learn if you get involved. So yeah, I had to like learn to like not say I'm bad with technology, like at the beginning of these meetings when I was setting up like AV. So just because it was kind of I was ruining my credibility. But yeah, it sounds like you want to volunteer, you want to install, or even do an install for your own apartment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is here to teach you. Like these meetings, our Slack group is like a great place for conversation. And then if you want to like, the best way to like learn about a mesh network is to go on installs and actually have an idea of like what that takes. So you're going to have to like troubleshoot it. You're going to have to find the band, you're going to have to be able to find the other antenna, and like you'll have to go through it. And it's totally hands-on experience. Sometimes it's a struggle, but at the end it's always really good. It's just, it's a little unpredictable. I mean, since I don't have much tech experience, I sometimes feel it when I'm leading an install on my own, and all the questions are put on my shoulders. But yeah, we have like volunteer trainings. I actually want to start picking that up. So maybe in like a week or two, we'll do another virtual volunteer training or install training, because people are back in the city now and a little more willing to install. And then like, yeah, the Slack group, we have so many channels, like any topic you're interested in, if you become interested in policy, if you become interested in architecture, if you become interested in, just really, I mean, there's so many different rabbit holes to go down when it comes to internet and telecommunications. So there's lots of ways to get involved. I mean, I don't know if you were at the beginning and you heard, we need help with just like organizational skills. Like, I don't entirely know what I'm doing. And then looking at Bed Suy Strong, I was like, wow, okay, this is how like a nonprofit like functions and like retains volunteers and stuff. So like we need a lot of help, yeah. So anyway, you want to get involved, but especially going on installs.
Cool.
Jillian, I'll chime in. I jumped in at the end because I was about to sign off, and then this is such a good question that I wanted to say for a second long. I would also just recommend, and Jillian was already mentioning this, but are you on Slack at all?
I just got on actually, yeah, when y'all started mentioning
Oh, great.
Stuff, yeah.
So there is a channel that's called Install Team that if you just write literally anywhere, hey, I'd love to join the install team, somebody will invite you to that. It's a private channel because there's some, like a person's address and some things like that could be in it. But that's a great way to get involved. Then you can join to go onto an install that are happening all the time. So you just find one that works for your schedule. And most of our installs are scheduled such that there's somebody who's an install leader. So somebody who has experience like Jillian and who's been training and doing this for a couple of years. And then we really, really try to encourage people who maybe aren't install leaders to join along. And the whole purpose is that Jillian helps to teach you and walk you through the process. And then you do a couple of those and eventually you start to get the hang of it. You understand the skills involved. You can become an install leader. We'll get you tools, get you anything you're interested in trying to get set up to be able to do that work. But that's the most kind of immediate hands-on, how does this work? What's going on? I'd like to be on a rooftop next week way to get involved. And then from there, you'll kind of get a sense of what what our bread and butter work is in many ways. And then from there, you can be like, here's a way that we could improve this, and then kind of start carrying that out and helping us to implement it.
Cool. That sounds good.
And to add to that too, we're also doing a site survey on Saturday at 12 p.m. at Herbert von King Park in Bed Suy. So if you're free, if you're free, come by and we can. So site survey, like we'll go around and see like what's going to be a viable place to install nodes and what's going to like give like the maximum efficiency and capacity, and also like, well, it's an interesting way to then start seeing the world world. You start looking around for good places to install antennas, and you start noticing where antennas are installed. So it's definitely kind of a unique perspective, but that's also like a very low stakes way. Like you can come by, it'll probably be about an hour or so. You meet the community, and yeah. So if anyone wants to come,
Thank you.
Now I'll really go. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks
a lot.
Yeah. I think, yeah, unless you have any more questions, maybe wrap this up and get some food. I'm kind of hungry. Feel free to reach out to me on Slack. Also, like even email, it's just jillian@nycmesh.net. Not really Twitter. I forget to check that a lot. Oh, and one thing too, I just wanted to mention is that there's a conference right now, a virtual conference going on based in Toronto called Our Networks. And I'll just put the link in too. And it's been happening all week, and it's happening over the weekend. And some of our friends from Toronto Mesh, and it's a lot of students who are at University of Toronto. They've been organizing this for the last few years. Scott and I went last year, and it was awesome. It's about, different kinds of networks. So it's about networking, it's about art, it's like very about engaging with the community and equity and justice, and just a really interesting program that they always have. It's really cool, and it's going on for the next few days. I think they probably just finished their final talk of the night, but I'd recommend checking it out. So just, while it's on. So it's like really excellent. So yeah. All right, Jolly, you can finish the live stream. So thanks for.
Sorry, just a quick final question. Would you mind, like, you mentioned your email, but I couldn't really get it. Like, I couldn't.
Sure. One sec. Yeah, right here.